the grand majestic and the unassuming guest. Arthur Penhaligon pushed open the heavy, brass-laden doors of the Grand Majestic Hotel. The air inside hummed with the low thrum of hidden machinery, air conditioning working overtime, he suspected, battling the late afternoon heat. Sunlight, filtered through stained glass panels depicting frolicking nymphs, cast kaleidoscopic patterns on the polished marble floor. He'd seen grander buildings, certainly. But there was a certain aggressiveness to the opulence here that made him instinctively wary. He shuffled towards the front desk, a worn leather duffel bag bumping against his leg. His boots, though clean, bore the indelible marks of miles walked. His tweed jacket, a hand-me-down from his late father, was faded and patched at the elbows. Arthur's face, etched with lines earned from years spent under harsh sun and weathering harder storms, completed the picture of a man who decidedly did not belong in this gilded cage. Behind the imposing mahogany desk stood Brenda Sterling, a woman who seemed to have been sculpted from ice and entitlement. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair framed a face meticulously painted with expensive makeup. A name tag, proclaiming her guest relations manager, shimmered under the strategically placed spotlights. As Arthur approached, Brenda's gaze flicked over him, lingering for a moment too long on his calloused hands, before settling back on her perfectly manicured nails. "May I help you?" Her voice was a carefully calibrated blend of politeness and disdain. "Yes, I'm looking for a room for the night." Arthur's voice was quiet, almost apologetic, as if he were already anticipating rejection. Brenda's eyes narrowed slightly. She tapped a crimson nail against the gleaming surface of the desk. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" "No, I don't. I was hoping you might have something available." Arthur shifted his weight, the duffel bag feeling heavier than usual. Brenda's lips tightened into a thin, disapproving line. She glanced at the computer screen in front of her, though Arthur suspected she wasn't actually looking at anything. "I'm afraid we're fully booked this evening, sir. A large conference arrived earlier today, and they've taken up all our available rooms." The lie hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Arthur could practically smell the prevarication, as potent as the expensive perfume Brenda wore. He'd heard that tone before, knew what it meant. He resisted the urge to argue, to point out the obvious, the distinct lack of activity in the lobby, the bored expressions on the faces of the bellhops leaning against the wall. He simply nodded. "I see. Thank you for your time." As Arthur turned to leave, Brenda couldn't resist a final, condescending remark. "Perhaps you could try the establishment down the street. I believe they sometimes have vacancies." Her emphasis on establishment dripped with thinly veiled contempt. Arthur didn't reply. He simply walked away, the weight of his duffel bag feeling even heavier now, not just with belongings, but with the unspoken judgment of a woman who had seen only the surface and found him wanting. The stained glass nymphs seemed to mock him with their perpetual merriment as he pushed open the heavy doors and stepped back into the oppressive heat, the sounds of the city swallowing him whole. He didn't look back. He already knew what she thought. And sadly, a small, weary part of him even believed it. Whispers and regret. The crunch of gravel under Arthur's scuffed boots was amplified in the biting air. The wind, a razor-edged thing, found every gap in his thin coat, a physical echo of the bleakness within him. Shoulders already bowed by years, he seemed to shrink with each retreating step, a silent admission of defeat. Brenda Sterling watched him go, a brittle smile tightening the corners of her mouth. Her blazer, a testament to the hotel's exacting standards, remained perfectly smooth. "Honestly, Tom, the nerve of some people," she announced, pivoting back to the polished expanse of the reception desk. "Trying to gatecrash a place like this. Did you see the state of him? And that pathetic excuse for luggage." Behind the bar, Tom meticulously buffed a glass, his movements deliberate. He'd witnessed Arthur's approach, noting the hesitant cadence of his voice, the faint but unmistakable aura of desperation clinging to him like wood smoke. And he'd certainly registered Brenda's swift dismissal, her tone laced with disdain. "He just needed a room, Brenda," Tom offered, keeping his voice even. "A room he clearly couldn't stretch to," she countered, propping herself against the gleaming counter. "This is the Sterling Grand, not a flop house." We have an image to uphold. Can you imagine the impact on our clientele? A short, unpleasant laugh escaped her. Besides, I could smell him from a mile away. Probably hadn't bathed in a week. Tom set the glass down with a sharper thud than intended. He doubted her assessment. He'd been close enough to detect only a subtle scent of kindling and something faintly medicinal. But contesting Brenda was an exercise in futility. She was an immovable force. He followed Arthur with his gaze, tracking his slow progress across the lot. The old man's head was bent low against the gusting wind. Reaching the edge of the asphalt, he paused, his fingers grappling with something at his wrist. A sudden swirl of wind whipped back his tattered cuff, revealing a glimpse of faded indigo, the unmistakable outline of an anchor and what looked like the initials R.M. etched below. A veteran's tattoo, time-worn but undeniable. A jolt of remorse struck Tom. He recognized those markings. His own grandfather had borne a similar emblem, a legacy of his Royal Marine Service. He understood what those faded symbols signified: commitment, sacrifice, a life etched with hardship. Brenda's callous words echoed in his mind, her assumptions, her undisguised prejudice. He pictured the old man limping away, rejected and alone in the hostile weather. A knot of shame and anger tightened in his chest. He'd remained silent. He hadn't spoken up. He'd merely stood there, polishing glasses, while Brenda had banished a potentially deserving veteran out into the storm. "Something the matter, Tom?" Brenda inquired, her tone clipped. He mustered a smile. "Just mulling over the rugby scores," he fibbed, turning back to his work. But his gaze kept drifting back to the window, to the empty space where Arthur Penhaligon had stood. The whisper of regret had begun, a persistent, nagging voice that promised to linger. A name from the past. The bell chimed his exit from the dusty confines of the antique shop, the spectral image of Arthur's disappointment lingering. A nagging feeling persisted, a missing shard in the mosaic of the old man's story. More than just tea, this felt like a profound disregard for a life, a history etched deeply into his features. Foregoing the novels, Tom sought out the library's computer bank. The machine's electric thrum provided a harsh counterpoint to Arthur's quiet grace. Fingers poised above the keys, he logged in. What thread was he chasing? A name, anything connecting the man to a past both remote and urgently relevant. Local World War II veterans, he typed, initiating the search. A deluge of results appeared: roll calls, commemorative sites, digitized yellowed newsprint. He began sifting through the digital haystack, seeking anything that matched Arthur's presence, the ramrod posture, the bearing that spoke of bygone discipline and valor, still evident even in his twilight years. Scroll after scroll, name after name, nothing clicked. He unearthed tales of heroism, sacrifice, and heartbreaking loss, each a stark reminder of war's brutal tally. Yet, none resonated with the man from the shop. Disappointment, an unwelcome shadow, began to darken his resolve. Perhaps he was wrong, hunting a phantom. Just as he was about to concede defeat, a headline snagged his attention: Arthur Penhaligon garners Distinguished Service Cross. Penhaligon. The name vibrated, a faint echo within his mind. Clicking, a faded photograph materialized. A younger man stared back, lines absent from his face, but the eyes, the piercing blue gaze, held the same unwavering strength Tom had observed just moments ago. He devoured the article, his pulse quickening. Captain Arthur Penhaligon, homegrown hero, had distinguished himself in the North African campaign. The narrative chronicled a daring raid, executed deep within enemy territory, a pivotal act that shifted the balance in a critical confrontation. A comrade's words echoed in the text, lauding Penhaligon's leadership and unyielding courage. Details emerged of injuries suffered, the embedded shrapnel he would bear for life. Tom continued, absorbing every detail. The piece mentioned his return, his quiet life teaching, the dedication he poured into his students. No family was mentioned, no hint of the simmering resentment he now seemed to harbor. He sank back, the weight of the revelation settling heavily. Captain Arthur Penhaligon, a celebrated war hero, reduced to an overlooked face, denied a simple kindness. The injustice burned. This wasn't merely about correcting a small slight, it was about resurrecting a dignity carelessly trampled. He knew what course he must now take. The hero unmasked. The newsprint felt flimsy, almost mocking, in Tom's suddenly ham-fisted grip. Snagged from the newsstand in haste, the headline had been a siren call, "Local hero honored at last." Beneath, in equally assertive letters, Captain Alistair Penhaligon, from Dunkirk to Downing Street. He'd retreated to his usual café sanctuary, the fragrant steam of the coffee a poor match for the sudden chill creeping through his veins. Unfurling the paper, the crisp snap echoed uncomfortably in the otherwise hushed atmosphere. The article was a catalogue of valor, detailing Penhaligon's wartime feats, plucking stranded soldiers from Dunkirk's fiery embrace, his service in the sweltering North African campaign, the countless lives spared by his foresight and grit. Each paragraph landed like a punch, amplifying the gnawing unease within him. Then, the photograph. A recent shot from a London ceremony. Captain Penhaligon, standing taller than Tom remembered, his chest ablaze with medals. The years had carved deep ravines into his face, the very face Brenda had summarily dismissed. A face that reflected a lifetime of sacrifice. The image wasn't high definition, but the stubborn set of his jaw, the unmistakable spark in his eyes. It was undeniably him. A wave of nausea crested within Tom, a sickening blend of disbelief and incandescent fury. He scanned the article again, desperately searching for a misprint, some loophole to invalidate the truth that was already sinking its claws in. But there were no errors. The piece continued, outlining the captain's quiet post-war existence, his devotion to local charities, his unassuming nature that belied a past etched in courage. Unassuming. Precisely. Humble. The antithesis of Brenda. He slammed the paper onto the table, the sharp report drawing curious glances. He ignored them. The injustice stung like acid. How could she? How could anyone treat a man, a veteran, with such blatant disregard? The echo of Brenda's condescending tone, her brusque rejection, reverberated in his head, each syllable a fresh abrasion. The coffee remained untouched, cooling into a bitter brew. He couldn't bring himself to drink, not with the taste of bile rising in his throat. A sudden, powerful urge seized him, to take action, to right this wrong. He had to inform someone, to make certain Brenda, and everyone else at the hotel, grasped the scale of their transgression. He knew Brenda would never concede an error, but he had to make the attempt. He owed it to the captain. More importantly, he owed it to himself. He couldn't simply let it slide. This was more than just a hotel room denied, it was a matter of respect, of integrity, of fundamental human decency. It was about the very moral fiber of the town, and a chilling certainty settled within him, he would not allow that fiber to be stained by ignorance and prejudice. Confrontation and realization. Tom's boots clicked sharply on the reception area's marble expanse as he approached. Brenda, perched regally on her stool, buffed a nail, completely indifferent to the gathering storm in his demeanor. Brenda, a word, he stated, his voice a controlled rumble. Annoyance briefly marred her features. Is it crucial? I'm nearly finished. A dismissive wave encompassed her immaculate hand. Yes, it's crucial. It should have been addressed the instant Captain Penhaligon entered this building. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, for crying out loud. Still harping on about that doddering geezer? Honestly, Tom, let it go. Some people simply aren't a fit for this establishment. He is our clientele, Brenda. A decorated war hero, who fought to secure your right to sit here and make snap judgments based on appearances. Tom produced a folded paper, its creases like etched lines of anger. Did you even bother with a name? Brenda scoffed. Why would I? He reeked of penury, hardly a guest for the Grand Imperial. The paper landed on the counter with a resonant thud. Have a look. She hesitated, then picked it up with a delicate wrinkling of her nose. Her eyes darted across the page, stopping at the photograph accompanying the headline, City Salutes Nonagenarian Veteran. Her eyebrows shot towards her hairline. It was Arthur. Resplendent in his dress uniform, medals shimmering under the spotlight. Captain Arthur Penhaligon, Tom enunciated, each word a cold shard. Recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star, the Purple Heart. A man who risked everything for people like you. The blood seemed to drain from Brenda's face. She devoured the article, her eyes flitting between the lines. The haughty veneer she habitually wore began to flake away, revealing a growing dread. He attempted to tell you, Tom continued, softer now, but laced with profound disappointment. He mentioned his service. But you weren't listening. You saw only a frail old man and dismissed him. You judged him. You were disrespectful. Her complexion resembled parchment. She tried to speak, but her throat constricted. The newspaper trembled like a leaf in her trembling hand. Do you grasp it now, Brenda? Tom inquired, his gaze unwavering and intense. Do you comprehend the scope of your error? A whisper finally escaped her lips. I had no idea. That's not an excuse, Tom countered, his voice firm, cutting through the air. It's an admission of your prejudice. You saw what you chose to see, not the man standing before you. He deserved better. This hotel deserves better. And frankly, Brenda, so do you. Brenda stared, her own reflection a fractured image in the glossy print. The weight of her prejudice settled upon her, crushing her spirit. The carefully crafted illusion of her pristine existence began to crumble to dust. This was more than a lapse in judgment, it was a moral failing. The search begins. Tom's gut twisted. He fixed his gaze on Brenda, his ears still buzzing from the harshness he'd unleashed. The sheer wrongness of their actions slammed into him, a physical blow. We have to find him, he urged, pushing himself upright. Brenda recoiled, ashen-faced. Find who? That old. I mean. She faltered, finally meeting Tom's frantic stare, her initial defiance crumbling into stark realization. Dear God! What have we done? They bolted from the hotel, the sinking sun searing their eyes. Arthur! Tom's voice cracked, the name ripped from his throat. He desperately surveyed the crowded street, a kaleidoscope of tourists and locals. Nothing. He couldn't have wandered far, Brenda's voice was a strangled whisper. She indicated a direction. I'll scour the park, you head for the shops. Tom surged down the sidewalk, threading his way through the throng. He plunged into a small cafe, the rich scent of roasted coffee and sweet pastries hanging in the air. He fumbled for his phone, pulling up Arthur's photo. Excuse me, he said, his voice raspy with desperation, showing the image to a barista with vibrant pink hair. Have you seen this man? He was in the vicinity earlier. The barista scrutinized the picture. Sorry, no recognition. He tried the next establishment, a souvenir shop crammed with cheap trinkets and novelty shirts. The answer remained the same. Each negative response ratcheted up the tension in his chest. Where could the old man be? Likely confused, perhaps injured. He rejoined Brenda in front of the hotel, her face a mask of anxiety. Nothing, she said, a barely audible exhale. Every bench, every nook. Vanished. We can't give up, Tom insisted, fighting back the rising tide of panic. He gestured the other way. Let's try the side streets. They searched for what felt like an eternity, their initial fervor slowly dissolving into a heavy, nauseating sense of futility. The sun dipped toward the horizon, stretching long, menacing shadows. The air turned brittle, and Tom pictured Arthur, isolated and cold, lost somewhere in the urban labyrinth. They paused at a small bakery, its welcoming light spilling onto the pavement. Tom presented Arthur's picture to the woman behind the counter, her features softened by age and kindness. She considered the photo. I believe, yes, she said thoughtfully. I served him a cup of tea earlier. Seemed a little disoriented, perhaps? He inquired about directions to the war memorial. A spark of hope ignited in Tom's chest. The war memorial. Can you tell me which way he went? The woman pointed down the street. Straight ahead, about 10 blocks. It's unmistakable. Tom seized Brenda's arm, his grip firm. Come on. The war memorial. They sprinted, their ragged breaths clouding the frigid air. The enormity of their transgression weighed upon them, a crushing burden of remorse and terror. Each footfall was a silent prayer, a frantic appeal for redemption. They had to find him. They had to set things right. A bench in the park. The park was a splash of green against the greying sky. Brenda pointed, a scarlet lacquered nail stabbing the air. There. See? Told you he wouldn't have gone far. Tom followed her gaze. Arthur Penhaligon sat hunched on a bench beneath a skeletal oak, its branches clawing at the overcast sky. A flock of pigeons, plump and unafraid, pecked at the crumbs scattered around his feet. He looked utterly alone, a small, grey figure swallowed by the vastness of the park. Brenda folded her arms. Serves him right. Probably trying to work some angle. Tom ignored her. A knot of guilt tightened in his stomach. He hadn't believed Brenda, not really, but he hadn't challenged her either. He'd let her dismiss Arthur with a wave of her hand and a whispered accusation. He'd prioritized avoiding a scene over doing what was right. I'm going to talk to him, Tom said, already moving. Brenda scoffed. Waste of time. Just leave him to it. He didn't reply, his focus already shifting to the man on the bench. As he drew closer, Tom noticed the details he'd missed in the hotel lobby, the way Arthur's shoulders slumped, the tremor in his hands as he scattered the breadcrumbs, the dull sheen of unshed tears in his eyes. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and the cooing of the pigeons. Arthur didn't seem to notice him approaching. He just kept scattering crumbs, his gaze fixed on the birds as they jostled for position. Tom stopped a few feet away, unsure how to begin. He wanted to apologize, to explain that he hadn't shared Brenda's prejudice, that he regretted his silence. But the words felt inadequate, clumsy against the weight of Arthur's obvious distress. Mr. Penhaligon. Tom said softly. Arthur started, his head snapping up. His eyes, magnified by thick spectacles, were red-rimmed and filled with a weariness that seemed to stretch back decades. He blinked, recognition slowly dawning. Oh, he said, his voice raspy. It's you. Tom stepped closer, his hands jammed in his pockets. I wanted to apologize. For what happened back at the hotel. Arthur looked back down at the pigeons, his face impassive. It doesn't matter. But it did matter. Tom could see it in the way Arthur's jaw tightened, in the faint tremor in his hands. He knelt, ignoring the dampness of the ground, and offered Arthur a small, hesitant smile. It matters to me, Tom said. You deserve better. We all did. He cleared his throat, searching for the right words. Brenda, she can be difficult. But that's no excuse. I should have said something. The pigeons, sensing the shift in energy, fluttered nervously and took flight, leaving Arthur alone once more. The silence stretched, broken only by the distant rumble of traffic. Tom waited, his heart pounding, unsure if Arthur would accept his apology or simply turn away. Forgiveness and grace. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park, painting the meticulously manicured lawn in hues of gold and amber. Arthur Penhaligon sat on a park bench, a solitary figure amidst the vibrant bloom of late-season roses. The crisp autumn air nipped at his cheeks, but he seemed oblivious, lost in a world of his own thoughts. A half-eaten sandwich sat beside him, attracting the attention of a brazen robin, but even the bird's insistent chirping failed to rouse him. Tom approached cautiously, his footsteps muffled by the fallen leaves. He'd been searching for Arthur for the better part of an hour, a knot of guilt tightening in his stomach with each passing minute. When he finally spotted him, a wave of relief washed over him, quickly followed by a fresh surge of remorse. Mr. Penhaligon? Tom asked gently, his voice barely above a whisper. Arthur looked up, his eyes, usually bright and full of life, now clouded with a dull sadness. Yes? Tom sat down on the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. Mr. Penhaligon, my name is Tom Harding. I work at the Grand Imperial. He paused, searching for the right words. I need to apologize. Profoundly. We made a terrible mistake. He explained everything, from Brenda's initial misjudgment to the subsequent discovery of Arthur's distinguished military record. He spoke of the hotel's policies, their commitment to inclusivity, and how Brenda's actions had fallen far short of those ideals. He didn't try to excuse her behavior, but rather emphasized the steps they were taking to ensure such a thing never happened again. We are deeply, deeply sorry for the disrespect you were shown, Tom concluded, his voice thick with sincerity. And we are incredibly grateful for your service to this country. Just then, Brenda arrived, her face etched with worry. She walked towards Arthur, her steps hesitant and her eyes downcast. Mr. Penhaligon, she began, her voice trembling slightly. I owe you an apology. A very big one. She looked up, her eyes meeting Arthur's for the first time. My behavior was inexcusable. I let my own prejudices cloud my judgment, and I treated you with a disrespect you did not deserve. I am truly sorry. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a path down her cheek. I want to offer you a complimentary stay at the Grand Imperial, in our best suite. Please, let us try to make amends. Arthur remained silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on Brenda's face. The robin, emboldened by the silence, hopped closer to the sandwich. Finally, he sighed, a weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. Thank you, he said softly. For apologizing. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. He looked at Brenda, his expression softening. We all make mistakes. It's how we learn from them that matters. He paused. I accept your apology. But please, remember this, everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their age, their appearance, or their background. He smiled, a small, fleeting smile that hinted at the warmth beneath his stoic exterior. Now, about that sandwich. A changed heart. Arthur sank into the plush velvet armchair, a world away from the park bench. Sunlight streamed through the panoramic windows of the Grand Majestic's premier suite, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A fruit basket overflowing with exotic delicacies sat on the mahogany table, and the scent of lilies filled the air. He should be elated, vindicated, but a hollow ache lingered in his chest. The memory of Brenda's dismissive sneer, the sting of being judged and rejected, still clouded the joy. Downstairs, Brenda stared at her reflection in the polished reception desk. Her face was gaunt, her eyes shadowed with regret. The image of Arthur's slumped shoulders as he walked away replayed in her mind. How could she have been so blind? So quick to judge based on appearances? Tom's hangdog expression as he polished the already gleaming brass fixtures mirrored her own shame. I feel awful, Brenda, Tom confessed, his voice barely a whisper. We really messed up. Brenda nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Eleanor Ainsworth had been particularly scathing, and rightfully so. Upstairs, Eleanor was indeed holding court. Having arrived for her usual month-long stay, she'd immediately inquired about the ruckus she'd heard whispers about. Now, she stood beside Arthur, her voice ringing with genuine admiration. Mr. Penhaligon, it is an honor to finally meet you, she declared, her gaze sweeping over him with discerning appraisal. I followed your career for years. Your bravery in service was an inspiration to my entire generation. And to think, you were treated with such disrespect. She fixed a steely glare in the general direction of the reception desk, though Brenda couldn't see it. Arthur shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't used to such accolades. He mumbled a thank you, more focused on the delicate teacup Eleanor had placed in his hand. The next morning, Brenda arrived at work an hour early. The lobby was deserted, save for the lone security guard polishing the already spotless floor. She walked behind the reception desk, took a deep breath, and began to rearrange the brochures, straightening each one with meticulous care. It wasn't about the brochures, though. It was about order, about control, about creating a space of welcome and acceptance. Later that day, a young couple, clearly struggling with luggage and a screaming toddler, approached the desk. Brenda forced herself to smile, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Welcome to the Grand Majestic," she said, her voice warm and sincere. "Let me help you with those bags. And perhaps we can find a quiet corner for the little one to relax." The couple looked at her, surprised, then gratefully accepted her offer. As Brenda led them towards the elevators, she felt a lightness in her chest, a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced before. It wasn't about the grandeur of the hotel, or the status of its guests. It was about the simple act of kindness, of seeing the person beneath the surface. Arthur, meanwhile, explored the hotel's gardens, a peaceful oasis of manicured lawns and blooming flowers. He paused by a rose bush, its petals a vibrant crimson. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't let the bitterness define him. He would focus on the good, on the kindness of strangers, on the beauty that still existed in the world. The Grand Majestic, once a symbol of rejection, was now a sanctuary, a place where, unexpectedly, his heart was beginning to heal.